Hello. Happy New Year. Welcome back to the Green Dragon Podcast. I'm your host, Aiden, and this is another episode of the Foundations of Freedom. It's been a minute. We're starting off the year right. We're starting off the year with a fun podcast, one that we've been talking about doing for a long time. And today we're doing it. Today we will be discussing the life of what I consider now America's first celebrity, and that is Davy Crockett. Davy Crockett was not only America's first celebrity, but I think he's one of the people that was pivotal in Americans gaining their sense of identity and this idea of American nationalism. And Crockett became popular at a time when the American people were looking for ways that they were different from the British. And the reason I believe Crockett became so popular is that Crockett represented what it meant to people to be American. And in many ways, Crockett satisfied this new identity they were looking for. Crockett was the first of his class to speak to represent what the American dream was. He represented a group of individuals which were hardworking frontiersmen, not high in social class, but worked hard to make a fortune in the land of opportunity. And so today we will be discussing Crockett and his life, his many works, and his legacy. So looking forward to this one, guys. This will be really interesting. I actually knew nothing about Davy Crockett. Now, like realizing after doing a little bit of research for this podcast, I thought I knew a lot about Davy Crockett, but really all I knew was like the Disney song, like Davy Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier. That's all I knew. I think I maybe saw a few episodes of his show from like the Disney show from the 50s, and that was it. Oh, Jake, you're muted.
My bad. I was
There
going
you
to
go.
say, I always got him confused with Daniel Boone.
Yeah.
Now that we've done a show on both of them, hopefully this will clarify things for me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, I would say I did the same at certain points too. I think it's confusing a little bit because I often think of like Davy Crockett as being more recent in history than Daniel Boone, and Daniel Boone being a little bit further back. But it's actually the opposite because so Davy Crockett spans from quite literally like right after the American Revolution, born in 1786, and then he lived till the 1830s, as we'll discuss. But yeah, I always kind of think of him as being like in the 1800s and Daniel Boone being before. I don't know why that is, but yeah, I get them confused quite a bit. So yeah, pretty interesting guy. One thing that I thought was interesting as I was listening to the the podcast that we were listening to prepare for this Clay Newcomb's podcast. He was talking about, and this is something I knew absolutely nothing about, but it's I think an interesting place to start. Being that Davy Crockett was kind of this representation of what the American dream was. But when he talked about the Irish Scots being the prime settlers of the Western frontier, and the Irish Scots being settlers that came from Scotland and Ireland, obviously, that's how you get the Irish Scots. But they were very, very poor. And the reason they moved to America was the fact that they heard that the American Western frontier was this land of opportunity. It was free to settle. They could essentially move here and have all the land they wanted, where back in Ireland or Scotland, they would be essentially living sort of, from my understanding, as either they would rent their land from the rich or they'd kind of be like these indentured servants. So it was almost a way to like emancipate themselves from their current living situation over in Ireland and Scotland. So I thought that was interesting because a lot of the Western settlers were Irish Scot. And now they played I think Davy Crockett kind of became their hero, so to speak. Kind of came from that bloodline. So yeah, it's it pretty that was kind of interesting because it kind of sets the stage a little bit to understand why Davy Crockett became as popular as he did, like even during his life as this celebrity. Because, like I said, he really was the first American celebrity, and we can get to that a little bit later. But early life on Davy Crockett, Davy Stern Crockett, full name. He was born August 17th, 1786. So only 10 years after um, America became America, Revolution, right? Um, he was born in a frontier cabin in present day Greene County, um, which is near the, forgive me for my pronunciation, people from Tennessee, the Nolichucky, I don't know if I'm saying that right. How do you say that, guys? How do you say Noli? And I know I should have prepared for this. Noli, and then it's literally Chucky. It's the Nolichucky River in Tennessee. Am I saying that right, Jake? Can you correct me if I'm
Yeah,
wrong?
I'm looking it up right now, and it looks like Nolichuki. You were
Nolichucky.
close. You were close. All your it was close except for the long U sound.
The long U sound. The long U got
That one
me.
got you.
The
Yeah.
Nolichucky River in Tennessee.
But for reference,
Yeah, where are we at?
it goes through, let's
Present.
see.
So this is obviously before Tennessee was a state, folks.
Yeah, so
We are in
this,
1786, but
what I'm seeing on the map, this looks like it's near Knoxville, so the
okay. East
east side
side,
of Tennessee.
east side of Tennessee.
Hmm.
So at that point, that really was. I mean, you think about the east side of where Tennessee's at nowadays. That's still considered the South, and not really the East Coast.
Hmm.
So in 1786, that truly is the Western frontier. Um, so we've got to keep that in mind. This wasn't anything settled by any means. This is the wilderness at this point. This is predating Lewis and Clark. This is predating Daniel Boone's exploration. So there's not much. There's not much there other than maybe Indians in 1786. Um, but yeah, he was born to John and Rebecca Crockett, and he was the fifth of nine children. As far as I could tell, it sounded like he had nine. There was nine of the Crockett children, so a pretty large frontier family. Um, Obviously, growing up on the frontier, you're in this small little frontier cabin, and most of Crockett's childhood is shaped by um the challenges and opportunities of growing up on the frontier. And when you grow up on the frontier, obviously it's a completely different life than, say, people in Boston are growing up and living at this time, right? Like this is a different part of young America, represented by these almost like wild frontier people, so to speak. And these people, I'm sure, being Irish Scot too, like these people are kind of just absolutely wild. Because they're coming from Ireland and Scotland, they came over
It's in
here
the
on a
blood.
boat. Yeah, they came over here on a boat, which is crazy. Like you spend what, like 3 months, 6 months in a boat.
Yeah.
You don't know what you're gonna get, and you show up on shores, and then you don't go live in the highly populated areas. You go out to the western frontier where there's nothing, just so you can have land for your family.
Yeah, not for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
You have to be a little wild, a little wild. So grows up on the frontier in 1792. So he would have been 6 years old. The Crockett family moves to Morristown, Tennessee, to seek better economic prospects. And this is kind of a theme I feel like through Crockett's life we'll see is he kind of moves around looking for better economic prospects. He's kind of always on the move for something bigger and better. And you don't really like his life even sort of ends abruptly because he's just kind of again, as a lot of these like characters from the frontier that we've talked about, Wyatt Earp and Daniel Boone, a lot of them just kind of wandered. They were rambling for a long time and never really. Some of them just never found their place where they could settle down. They just kept going and going. And I think it is interesting. And I wonder too if it's kind of that wild upbringing, like you're just in constant exploration mode and you can never really settle down. And I wonder if that's
Yes.
part of it.
You don't know any other mode outside of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah,
Probably too because the country's still being developed, so there's not a whole lot of businesses out there that you
right.
can settle down with or trades. You're still constantly having to adapt. The borders
Mm-hmm.
are always expanding, so yeah,
Yeah.
the country itself is in constant motion, so
And
why
I'm
wouldn't you be as well?
right. And for somebody like that grew up in constant motion, it's just kind of makes sense, you know? I mean, now it's easy to say, oh, that's, like, why didn't he settle down? Because the whole country's kind of been explored, so to speak. And
Right.
you can still I mean, you can still be a rambling man around the States, but it's the amount of opportunity you're going to find traveling place to place is a lot less than you would have back then. Like you were traveling to a brand new place that nobody had explored with brand new opportunity. So it is pretty. I mean, for somebody like that, it had to be a very sort of like everything was kind of there for the taking if you wanted to take the risks. Oh yeah, sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't realize I took a drink of water right when you ended and I meant to come in right after you.
No worries.
But yeah, I was thinking a little bit about that too, of just how much I think there was like this inner yearning to see how big America was. And I
Hmm.
feel like Daniel Boone and Davy really wanted to see how much they could explore and get to see with their own eyes and kind of be the first contacts with it all. So
Hmm.
I understand why they wanted to just keep moving.
Yeah, at that point nobody knew what was out there, so it was the sky was the limit at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Why would you sit and be stagnant when you had so much opportunity? Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. And a lot of these characters too that we talk about, and Dave is no exception. Like the upbringing they had on the frontier, they did so many different things, and even we saw this with Abraham Lincoln a little bit. He did so many different things in his and like his the ages of like 10 to 20 or even 10 to 25. Like he did a little bit of everything. And that is something interesting when you're looking at a lot of these characters. They had to do a little bit of everything to make it, and so he did too. So I mean, obviously, growing up on the frontier, you learn. He had very limited formal education, like most of these guys do, and his he basically learned everything he did on the frontier. So he learned practical skills, and things like woodcraft from his father, and a bunch of other more frontier skills, by just living day to day life, right, in Morristown. And then as a young man at the age of 16, Crockett's father apprenticed him to a cattle drover and so Davy's father, John Crockett, hires him out to cattle drover, and that's kind of the first journey that Crockett takes out onto sort of the frontier and experiencing the frontier. Um, and so he learned very, very quickly a lot of those frontier skills like hunting, tracking, and survival skills during his time as a cattle drover. Um, so yeah, it's always interesting to see how well-rounded these individuals usually are, just because of their life experiences. Not necessarily in a formal sense, but like they were able to do just about everything.
That was so cool about them.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it's impressive because like, and maybe too, it's just it was a different time. So if you think about some of the things we're able to do now, if you look at the average American and all the things they're able to do now, you'd be like, oh yeah, that person can do quite a bit. But I feel like it's just more impressive because we
Yeah.
can't do the things that they were doing. If you ask the average American if they could go live on the frontier and hunt and track and be a cattle drover and woodwork and do all these different things, you'd be like, no,
Yeah.
I can't do any of those things.
And if you think about it, it's like it was a necessity at that
Right.
point to have those skills. If you couldn't pick up on it, there's probably a high likelihood that you're
Not gonna
not
make
going to
it.
last too long out there.
Yeah,
So,
no,
yeah.
you're meant for the elite in the East
Right.
Coast, like
East Coast.
Boston or Philadelphia. You're meant to be a Benjamin Franklin sitting in his
Yeah,
little study.
exactly. Yeah. You're not
Yeah,
frontier material.
not frontier material, but it is amazing. Like you hear, you think about this. This is very, very early on in American history. You think of a lot of the early American history is all happening out on the coastline, the East Coast, and you don't. I mean, this is kind of the first story other than like maybe some of the war, maybe some of like the war that was fought inland with like the Indians during the Revolutionary War at some of the like the forts. Other than that, I don't think I've heard a whole lot about the frontier this early on in the country from any other source. Do you guys know of anybody else any other stories or figures that were on this far as far west as Davy this early on? I mean, I'm sure there was, but I'm just trying to think of like prominent figures.
Yeah, it was what's his name? Jim Bowie, who was in the Alamo.
Oh,
Was
Jim
he
Bowie was another guy. Yeah.
I think he was Texas, so like west but southwest.
Southwest. Yeah.
Right. He's one
Cause
that comes to mind.
yeah, because he also was
He was in the Alamo
he
as
was in the
well,
Alamo as
along with
well,
Davey.
along with
Yeah.
Davy. Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think he stands kind of a head and shoulders above everyone else.
Hmm.
But I'm sure there's more though.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just trying to think because I was thinking about it as we were doing research for this podcast. I was trying to think. I think this is like the first sort of figure I've learned about that
Yeah.
was this far west at that time. Because usually when you learn about American history in this time period, it's all focused around
Hmm.
Boston, Philadelphia, New York,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
maybe Virginia, but yeah, yeah, no, it's pretty interesting. Um, shortly in 1806. So he would have only been in 1806. He would have only been 20 years old. He married Polly Finley and started a family. And shortly after that, he joined under the Tennessee militia in the military. So he left his cattle droving experiences, job behind, all that, and he joined the military under none other than Andrew Jackson. Good old Andrew. Old Hickory.
What a
Old
guy.
Hickory. What a guy. What a guy. During the Creek War. So I don't know a whole lot about the Creek War, guys. Tom, do you know anything about the Creek War?
No,
I think
unfortunately.
so. I know it was I know the Creek War was it was sort of this conflict regionally by Native American factions. I'm trying to remember which tribes it was between, but I know that the American military got involved. Um, and whenever we got involved in any war with the American Indians, it never really fared too well.
Yeah.
But yeah, here we go. So the Creek War, also known as the Red Stick War, was a regional conflict between um, the Red Sticks, or also known as the Upper Creeks, a Muskogee tribal faction uh, who resisted U.S. colonial expansion. And the United States formed alliance with the traditional enemies of the Muskogee, the Choctaw, and the Cherokee nations. So the Choctaw and Cherokee sided with the U.S. They made an alliance with the U.S. and they went down there and they took out the Red Sticks. It's just a nice way of putting it, but yeah. So this conflict was basically all because the Red Sticks didn't like the expansion west from colonial America, and I think the Choctaw and the Cherokee nations were like, it's going to happen, so let's just join them. Let's take out our enemies. That's kind of what I got from it as I was doing a little bit of research on it, but
Yeah, it looks
um,
like most of it took place in Mississippi and Alabama as well.
Mississippi,
That's where the
Alabama,
majority of the
yeah,
conflict occurred.
Tennessee, southern Georgia,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, and the Creek War ended, I think, in 1814 with the signing of the Treaty of Fort Jackson. Um, and that's where Andrew Jackson forced the Creek Confederacy to surrender. I think it was he put them in what's now like 21 million acres in southern Georgia and central Alabama. So just kind of shoved them there, kicked him off their land. Andrew Jackson was a wild man. We'll have to get to Andrew Jackson one of these times.
We
That would
will.
be a fun one.
I was driving through Tennessee, and I was going over this lake, and it was like Old Hickory Lake or something like that. And I was like, I
Yeah.
wonder if that has anything to do with Andrew Jackson. And sure enough, it's named after him. So
Yeah, there's a
he's
whole
quite
highway there. Old
uh-huh.
Hickory Highway
Old
goes right
Hickory
into
Highway.
Nashville.
It's interesting. It really, he's an interesting guy. But anyways, so yeah, uh, he joins the Tennessee militia. He fights under General Andrew Jackson. Tom, I don't know. Did you in the podcast? Did you listen? They were discussing Davy's. Uh, he was kind of even though he in some cases was sort of on the same side as Andrew Jackson. Getting into his political career, it seemed like he strongly kind of opposed Andrew Jackson and Andrew Jackson's approach, especially when it comes to American Indians. Did you get to any of that at all?
I think I got to a little bit of it. Um, but I think from my previous recollection of that podcast, um, that was definitely something that was a problem to Crockett because he really wanted to make sure Indians were treated fairly.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember that Crockett did try to run for presidency,
Mm-hmm.
but lost out because of his stance primarily for the Indians. I believe that's what I
Right,
heard.
right, exactly. And the reason I bring that up is because in this case, it's kind of interesting because this is Crockett's first real experience with Jackson. And I think because of how this war ends with basically the Red Creek basically just getting exiled to this small part of what's now Georgia and Alabama. I think Crockett starts to develop this sort of opposition to how people like Andrew Jackson look at the American Indians. Because I think for Crockett growing up on the frontier, he grew up around the American Indians, and you know, he didn't really have too many problems with them. It sort of lived in harmony with them in most
Yeah.
cases. And so sort of like Daniel Boone as well. Both of them seem to have this like kind of deep, profound, this deep respect for the Indians. And so I think, Jackson, who's kind of this gung ho, let's kick them off their land. And who cares about them? It's ours now. We're here to take over. That type of thing. And that kind of rubbed Crockett the wrong way. And so I think the reason I brought that up now is because I think later in Crockett's life, as you start to see him oppose the Jacksonians, the group kind of surrounding Andrew Jackson, I think that's sort of when that opposition begins. So
Yeah.
that's the first time they didn't mention it specifically, but I wonder if that played a role in Crockett's outlook later in his political career.
I'm guessing so because it seems like he wanted to almost just become part of what he explored. I think
Mhm,
the Indians were part of that.
mhm,
So I think after the war experience, he didn't want to be on the side of just like moving people around if they'd been there first. I think he was more of the opinion of like figuring out a way for the white men and the Indians to form some sort of society together, like try to figure something out so that they could live together in their own ways, but also find new roads to future prosperity with getting to
mhm,
know each other and stuff. So
mhm,
I think Crockett was definitely on the part of wanting peace over war.
mhm,
But I think we'll get it to it later, but from my understanding of like the Alamo, he saw that as a good war to fight. But I wonder
mhm.
if he fought this war because he thought it was the right thing, but then through his experience, he wondered if it really was.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I wonder that too. Yeah, it seemed like for the time he had a pretty nuanced perspective. Like he was
Yeah.
he had a very nuanced, like he was a pretty balanced individual when it came to his outlook on sort of politics and how things should be handled. Um, so after this war, he's discharged from military service. He returns to his family in Tennessee. And this is sort of steps to the next chapter of his life, which is his political aspirations. So he started to show interest in politics and community affairs. His early political career in 1817, he was elected as Justice of Peace in Lawrence County. I don't know what a Justice of Peace is. I just found this on the internet. Do you guys know what a Justice of Peace is? I've never heard of that once. I'm assuming it's like Wyatt Earp. He was in charge of the peace. He
I
was
know
like a peacekeeper.
they like legally marry people. That's about all I know.
Oh, is that right? That's all he was. He was just marrying people off. He was
I
just a
think that's what it
minister.
is. Yeah.
He was a hitchhiker, not a hitchhiker. That's the wrong
That's
word.
literally all I mean, it probably entails more responsibilities than that, but
See,
that's
here
fine
I
by
thought
me.
he was. See, I hear justice of peace, and I think immediately he's keeping law and order. But in fact, he was just creating more problems by marrying people. He was marrying people, and the people were like, I think it was Crockett's fault. I don't love him anymore.
Yeah.
We got problems here. Yeah, I don't know. Keepers of peace.
I know
Anyways,
when you hear that, you're like justice of the peace, like somebody puts a smackdown on problems, but
yeah.
no, yeah.
I looked on the the government website. It says, by definition, justice of peaces are judges of local courts with limited jurisdiction. They hear legal actions for small claims, try persons accused of misdemeanors, and conduct preliminary examinations of prisoners. So, like low level judges, I guess you could say.
Interesting. Well, in 1821, he stepped it up, guys, because he went from justice of the peace to the commissioner of roads. So that he went from hearing low-level cases in court to commissioning roads to be built, I guess.
Called up to the big leagues.
He went up to the big leagues. Maybe, if he was around today, we'd send him out to Chicago and maybe he'd fix all the fix all the
Yeah, he could take the mayor spot.
Yeah, the mayor
I
spot.
think he'd do a good job.
Figuring out how to, keep traffic flowing and not have the road shut down all the time, constantly being worked on. I don't think the roads weren't, up to standard when Crockett was commissioner.
I don't know if even Davey may not even be able to fix Chicago.
No, Chicago's a lost cause.
I think it's a lost cause. Yeah.
So he started out pretty low level government, but then in 1823 he was elected as colonel in the Tennessee militia. So he kind of moved up to state legislator, and then he successfully ran for a seat in the Tennessee Senate or the Tennessee State's legislature in 1827.
It's really moving up now.
Yeah, very quickly too. Like you go from like just a rinky-dink Lawrence County justice of the peace to state legislator within 10 years. And then another interesting thing that came up as I was doing research, it said he had a pretty strong commitment to education. I thought that was interesting. He advocated for public education during his legislative tenure, which I thought was interesting, coming from a background of not really formal education, being a frontiersman. Interesting that he had kind of this very strong desire for people to be for public education, make sure people were being educated. So I wonder if he saw that as bringing in another generation of people that were well educated, could do well in a growing, colonizing Western frontier.
I mean, if I may, guys, I was just looking at these quotes from Crockett,
Yeah.
and one of them, he says that I would rather be beaten and be a man than be elected and be a little puppy dog. So it seems like he really wanted to uphold his principles in his office, and that must have gained him quite a lot of recognition, especially being you mentioned in the notes that he was one of the very first politicians to come from what would be considered the working class at that time. And I mean, he did quite a lot, from my understanding, in his political office.
Yeah, he was pretty successful. He was a pretty successful politician, and I think he really did. He kind of grasped the public favor. The public really liked him, and I think for the reason that he was just your average American that was in there. He wasn't some high and mighty guy from the East Coast that was kind of. I think the thing about Crockett, and this goes back to what I said in the opening, I think a lot of people felt like the Thomas Jeffersons and even the George Washingtons and the Ben Franklins and the John Adams still in this way represented the British, they kind of still had this aura about them, whether, their words didn't necessarily say it. I mean, like you've got Thomas Jefferson that was pretty opposed to big government, right? But like just the aura that they carried was not that far, it was not that different from the British and the place they came from. So I think for somebody like Crockett, who is one of them, one of the working class, one of these people that's not an aristocrat, to come and become a politician and represent them meant a lot to the American people because it actually gave the working class, the non-aristocrats, the non basically anybody that wasn't super well off, sort of this voice, this figure to look at, and gave them a hero. And so I think that's why you see the working class in America represented for this first time ever. Those Irish Scots that we talked about on the Western frontier finally got somebody that was one of them to represent them in the government rather than these. That's why they call them the bigwigs in Washington, right? There's a reason they call them that, and like you sort of sense that, you know, that Crockett wasn't one of those Washington bigwigs, so to speak. He was kind of his own man. So it was really interesting to kind of see that. And after his state legislator, he's, you know, elected to Congress in 1829 as a Jacksonian Democrat. He immediately, I mean, he wasn't necessarily popular with the other politicians though, and some of the more well off, we'll say aristocrat people in America, because he immediately goes in and voices his concerns about government spending and fiscal responsibility within the government and all these things that, you know, still aren't popular to talk about, you know,
I was gonna say,
200 years later.
rolling over in his grave right now. That
Yeah.
36 trillion in debt.
Yeah, right. Yeah, 200 years later, you know, you wonder if he had a little bit of common sense about it. But yeah, he kind of stood in opposition towards both you know, both sides of the aisle in that regard. He kind of was his own he stood to his own opinions. He didn't fall in line with either of the parties because, you know, in 1835, at that time, President Andrew Jackson's elected president, and Crockett openly opposed Andrew Jackson's policies, including the Indian Removal Act. And that led to his defeat in the congressional election that year. So he actually lost that because a lot of people didn't like what he had to say about that. And you know, he wasn't necessarily a popular guy with the people that the non-working class people when it came to his politics. But he was I think very much a man of the American people, the heart of the country, the working class people, but didn't necessarily hit it off with the Richies.
Yeah, a little bit of a threat there.
Yeah,
A little
exactly.
too much common sense,
A
right?
little too much common sense for him. Yeah. So yeah, I think his political career is really interesting, and that's something I knew absolutely nothing about because he seemed like, you know, in his like 5 years of representing Tennessee in the House of Representatives, he seemed like a pretty good politician. Like he could make a career out of it. He just, you know, I guess wasn't at that time with his views on certain things. I think what really did him in was his opposition to Andrew Jackson. But
Mhm.
I think he probably would have stayed in politics. But it is an interesting portion of his life, because I can't think of another. I mean, there's not too many American heroes that were a successful politician, also were working class. They served in the military and then went on to solidify themselves as like one of the greatest
American folklore heroes ever because they fought in arguably one of the greatest battles ever. I mean, can you guys think of anybody else? Maybe I'm just blanking, but I can't even think of anybody like in modern times that holds that type of resume.
Yeah, really only a select few, I would say. And he's up there.
And by like this time, he's already starting because he got really popular while he was while he was a politician. He got really popular, and people loved him. Like people thought he was like he wasn't just a like a well-known politician. Like people were
Mhm.
writing like books about him while he was alive. People loved Davy Crockett. He was he was almost like I'm trying to think of like a modern American to compare him to because like his fame, he was like the most famous American. They were like writing plays about him
Oh yeah,
while he was alive.
Nimrod Wildfire.
Yeah, Nimrod Wildfire. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom, do you want to explain that a little bit?
So was this during his time in Congress, but there was a Broadway show came out and the star was Nimrod Wildfire, but everyone knew it was Davy Crockett
Mhm.
because stories of his have came around and they put quotes of his that people know he said in the show.
Yeah.
So a lot of what he used to say became like common phrases for everyone.
Mhm.
Like there's one what was it when people would say something and people would be like, um, doesn't match up to Crockett or something like that?
Yeah, I
You
think you're
remember
right.
that?
I think you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was pretty cool that they made a Broadway show about him and
Uh-huh.
the producers didn't say it was him, but everyone knew it was him.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy and it's crazy because like he's not only famous, this is not only fame that's happening here in the US. He's like they're they're producing plays of like I think Nimrod Wildfire was describe he was like a Kentucky colonel, right? But it was done at the Garden Theater in London, if I remember right. So he was
Oh,
the plays are being done in London, in Paris. And so he's
oh,
creating this world fame, this world persona of what a Western frontier
mm,
American looks like, what the American person is, right? And so for
mm,
the first time in American history, an American is no longer this big wig, like one of the big, well, I'll just keep saying big wig, but a big wig in Washington, like John
mm,
Adams or Thomas Jefferson or George Washington, right? For the first time ever, you get this different persona of Americans, and it's this rough, rugged man from the Western frontier. That's what an American is. And so all of a sudden, the public perception goes from really wasn't a separation of okay, here's the US identity and here's Great Britain. It was kind of just like, oh yeah, the United States is basically just a new great like it's a new Great Britain, right?
mm.
It's just Great Britain abroad.
Yeah.
As our buddy Jack would say, it's just France abroad. So it was just the UK abroad. But all of a sudden, America had this identity. And so it's really interesting to see that not only happen, he's not only famous in the US, he's not only a politician in the US, he's this US politician literally showing up to I forgot to mention this, he's showing up to, you know, the House of Representatives, you know, he's showing up as, you know, elected official in the House of Representatives, he's showing up in buckskin
Yeah.
rather than these wigs and these fancy, you know, outfits. He's showing up in his buckskin with his Bowie knife and his hat. And so it's pretty or a coonskin cap. So and that coonskin cap, a lot of people associate with Daniel Boone. That was actually Davy Crockett. I think the story is that with the coonskin cap, it was I think actually they portrayed Nimrod Wildfire to wear this coonskin cap, and Davy Crockett heard about it, and he's like, "Oh, I kind of like that." So he started wearing a coonskin cap.
because of the play about him. So it's kind of like this really weird, wild, like I can't think of another figure in American history that's this like like popular worldwide, successful politician, and at the same time, like he's still we're joking before the podcast. He's still like kind of broke. Like he's still looking for things to do because he's somehow with all this fame that this guy from the Western frontier. He's like the most like the greatest Western frontier success story, the greatest Irish Scot success story on the Western frontier. He's somehow still like flat broke all the time. But yeah, very interesting character to be this successful politician, having plays written about you in the theaters in London and Paris, creating this world persona for America and what Americans are, being this celebrity, and then yeah, and being this normal human being. Quite interesting. Because yeah. But anyways, that kind of sums up his political career. After he loses the congressional election, it's pretty much over for him in politics. He's done. But obviously a very important point in his life and in history. But then moving on to sort of the last and final leg of his journey in life is the Alamo in Texas, which he's most famous for, I think, at least now. So Davy Crockett's involvement in Texas and the Alamo is a obviously a very crucial chapter in his life, but it showcases his dedication to the frontier spirit, his political beliefs, and like in the end, his ultimate sacrifice. So he moves to Texas, 1835. He's done with politics. He wants a fresh start. He's exhausted. He's like, okay, like we said, kind of flat broke, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna move to Texas. And he's like, in this new Texas frontier. Well, it wasn't. It was the Republic of. I mean, you've got like this giant area down there. Texas isn't a state yet, right? He moves down to this territory, which is he moves to Texas, which is then still part of Mexico. And he's like, if I move there, he's like, he was going to benefit off the land speculation in the Mexican territory. He was hopefully going to make a lot of money for it. Basically told his wife, he's like, listen, he's like, I'm going to go down there, and he's like, I'm going to I'm going to make a bunch of money. He's like, I'm going to get us land, and this is going to be our new home. And he's like, our family will be set then. And it's kind of funny, you got this really famous dude, and he's headed down to Mexico because he can't even make it in his own country that he's famous in. So he's got to go move to another country. I thought it was just kind of interesting. Like he moved to Mexico to like basically get out of the US because the US didn't have any opportunity for him, even though he's this like kind of super successful or famous dude. But he goes to Texas, and so he goes down there 1835, 1836, the political landscape in Texas is very tense. You've got these growing tensions between Mexican authorities and the American settlers, and Crockett's inspired by the American settlers' revolutionary spirit, and he joins the Texan forces in their struggle to gain independence from Mexico. So he's just kind of he gets caught up in the whirlwind, so to speak. And that kind of sets the stage for the Alamo. So he just goes down there because he's like, I'm gonna get some land and some money off this. And a lot of people were moving to Texas because it was the land opportunity. It was the next push on the Western frontier. This happens over and over and over and over again. American history, right? People keep pushing further west until they get all the way west. But this is the next big push, and he gets basically pulled in right at the biggest moment in Texas history. He's just there. I don't know how he just like showed up for like some of the biggest like I mean like he was just he somehow became like America's biggest celebrity, and then all of a sudden he was there for the biggest moment in Texas history. Kind of wild. But Jake, I'm going to share the screen real quick to that map.
Oh,
Um,
yeah,
and then if you
this is a
want to,
good
yeah, this is good visual.
description.
Let's see. Can you guys see that? All right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, that's
Okay.
good.
So right here you've got on the right hand side you got the United States, and then you've got the Republic of Texas. Um, you've got this is land disputed by Texas and Mexico right here. And you've got Mexico here. And so what ends up happening is the Alamo is right on this border um, of the Republic of Texas and the lands disputed by Texas and Mexico. So Santa Anna, who is the leader of the Mexican forces, he's coming up to squash this little rebellion that they got going up in the Republic of Texas. So he heads up there. They and they kind of it all kind of comes to a head, and the forces that are in Santa Anna's forces come up, and the I guess the Texas revolutionaries are all kind of, and guys like David Bowie and Crockett who are there, they all kind of end up in the Alamo, and it's like this perfect storm, and that's what ends up creating this battle at the Alamo, which is a former Franciscan mission in San Antonio. So I think, yeah, David Bowie was there, Crockett was there, and William B. Travis were there. Just some notable figures.
Also,
And yeah,
sorry
yeah,
to
go
cut
ahead.
you off. I think it's important to note too that Santa Anna was a huge deal in Mexico. Not
Oh,
only was he the general, but he was also basically the head of the government, which
mhm,
is what initiated the rebellion itself. Was that the Texans didn't want to be ruled by Santa Anna, who was centralizing the power under himself. With
mhm,
he was the head of the government, he was
mhm,
the government. So that was what precipitated this conflict. So he's actually coming in personally as the president of Mexico to come and squash the rebellion.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. That's a great point. Do you guys Tom, do you have anything to add on the Alamo? Any Alamo history that we need to cover here as we're talking about this before we get into Crockett? Get back to Crockett.
Um, I mean, one of the things was really neat. I think the Alamo had like 147 people or soldiers in it from the
Hmm.
Texan Army. And from my understanding, the Santa Ana Army was about a 5,000.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
So like they were outgunned 50 to 1 essentially. So I thought that might be a good way to set the stage of just how big of like an act of courage it was for the guys in the Alamo to say no, we're gonna keep fighting here.
Hmm.
And how they even sent a messenger to what was that general's name? Um was that Houston?
Oh, Sam Houston. Yep.
Sam Houston,
Houston.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And he was too far away to bring help in time. So they knew it was just them and they held out for 13 days, which was insane.
No, it's crazy. I can't imagine being surrounded by that many troops in a little in a little mission, because
Mhm.
it's not a I mean it's a when you've got that many people in there, I mean you're surrounded there for 13 days under siege, and to just stand your ground is crazy. It's it's
it's impressive. And I think this is like something too that is so Texas.
Very
So
Texas.
it's very Texas. I really do like it's really cool to like think that this is how Texas started with a bunch of guys standing their ground. Um, but yeah, pretty amazing feat to withstand forces for that many days. And that's why, it goes down in history like this. As it's almost like sometimes the Alamo is almost thought of as a victory in many ways.
Mhm.
When you hear people talk about the Alamo, it's never like this. I mean, obviously it was a defeat, but like people talk about it like it was this great. It was something that was done that was amazing. And it really is because it shows the testament of the sort of Texan stand your ground spirit. So I think that's pretty cool. But yeah, so during the siege, during the 13 day siege, Crockett, his exact role is a little bit disputed, but most people say he likely served as a lieutenant colonel. And during those 13 days, he, at least from stories that have been told, he led kind of his men to hold out as long as they possibly could. Um, but in the end, obviously, we all know March 6th, 1836, I think it was, the Mexican forces breached the walls of the Alamo and just ultimately overwhelmed everybody that was left inside. Um, Crockett, along with the other defenders, fought to the end. And so that is something that was noted, even I think by Santa Anna, is I think he said in his letter about the battle, I think he noted that the Americans fought till the very end. Nobody really gave up. And he was impressed by that. Even in the face of death, that they fought to the end. But no, there was legend suggests, because this is where the controversy kind of happens with Crockett, because people really don't know what happened to him. Some people think that he was captured and then later killed, but other people think he he died fighting. And so this is what people go back and forth, like the Alamo people go back and forth. I was listening to some Alamo people talk about this, like Alamo historians, and they'll go back and forth and argue about, oh, no, Crockett died, after he was captured and they, executed him or whatever. But I think it's kind of more fun to think of Davy Crockett going out fighting. So rather than just being executed. So I think that's how most Texans like to think of Crockett's death, going down fighting. But that is up for debate. I should put that out there because some people are very passionate about that. I listened to a man debate another man for 15 minutes about how Crockett was captured and then killed. And I'm like, it didn't matter. He died either way.
Yeah, it doesn't make it any less heroic. However, whatever way
No, it doesn't
happened.
matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter at all. But no, very interesting what people will debate about. But anyways, either way, Crockett died a hero in the Alamo, along with all the other men that died fighting in the Alamo. And this kind of solidifies Crockett as this like elite American hero.
Yeah.
He was obviously a celebrity, and then like even after his death just became a bigger and bigger celebrity because of his role in the Alamo. And the sacrifice, like we said, the sacrifice at the Alamo became the rallying cry for the Texan cause, the symbol of American resistance. And again, that just adds to
the symbol of what it was to be an American that Crockett had already started, giving the average American person this this sort of something to look up to see that it's possible, even if you don't come from a lot, to have a good life in America. So that's really cool. Yeah, I guess we could is there anything else about the Alamo that we need to cover before we wrap up?
I did just share a picture in the
Hmm.
chat here.
Hmm.
There's a children's book I had, and this picture was in it, and I guess that's always the thing that's in my mind when I think of David Crockett at the Alamo.
I've seen his picture.
You have?
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll
okay.
share it.
So I don't know, I thought it was kind of a cool representation, like his gun in his arm swinging, but yeah.
Yeah, just going down fighting. Yeah,
Mhm.
I forget. I've seen this picture before, but yeah, that's a great picture. Um, yeah, that's what you want. That's what you want to think of as Crockett's going out,
Yeah,
gun swinging, probably because he's running out of ammunition and
yeah,
just fighting to the end. That's pretty awesome.
yeah. I mean, I think he probably would have fought to the end, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Because I listened to that third episode when um Clay Newcomb was going back and forth, and I was like, well, I mean, from what we see of his character in other places of like, going into bears, like when he's hunting his bears,
Mm-hmm.
and like he's got all his dogs there, and like it's getting a really intense fight, It doesn't seem like he's the kind of guy that back away from anything,
Right.
especially like shown in his political career of like how he stood up for a lot of things that may have lost him the presidency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I guess to me, I feel like from my understanding of David Crockett, he probably went down swinging.
Yeah, I think so. I think he went down swinging. I'm going with swinging.
Yeah.
Anybody, anybody that wants to fight me over it, come at me. I'll I'll fight some little Alamo nerd over this. Come at me. Come at me on Twitter. Let's get
I check.
a little Twitter war started.
Yeah,
We'll start another.
we'll leave it open for debate.
We'll leave it
Comments are
open
open.
yeah,
If
comments
you
are
have
open.
any
Come on the pod. Come on the pod.
yeah, change my mind.
Change my mind. Crockett died swinging, changed my mind. Eh, take it how you will. All right. Well, let's just talk about the legacy real quick because that's something I started the podcast off with. I think when you're looking at Davey, you know, it's hard to deny the impact he had on kind of shaping the American identity here. He really did bring about this sense of nationalism, and whether it was intended to or not, through the play, he is the reason that like the rest of the world thinks when they think of Texas,
Mm.
they think, you know, guns and crazy people, right? Like he's the reason for like these really rough Western people. He's the reason that, in in that, just be like he, they thought of Americans as these kind of wild, rugged men. And I think that's pretty amazing. And because of that too, he gave the average American person something to look at and strive to be. Uh, and I think it, in many ways, captivated young Americans' imaginations, even in the last 50 years. I mean, like his story and his just kind of the aura and the presence of Davy Crockett has, I mean, I learned about him as a kid and I thought he was cool. You know, his story's kind of timeless. So he kind of immortalizes that in some aspects. His legacy kind of lives on. So he's this frontier hero. You know, you think of him as the frontiersman. You think of him after doing this, you should also think about him as this political figure that wasn't afraid to, you know, just stand up for his beliefs. And then obviously the Alamo martyr that he was plays a huge impact in his legacy, especially in the history of Texas. And then just the cultural impact he's had. I think there was a bunch of books written about him during his lifetime. Obviously, he had the plays, and then there was the Disney television series in the 50s that most of us are familiar with, starring, I think, Fess Parker.
That's right.
Okay, cool. Fess Parker. So, I mean, just like the fact that in 1955, his story was still relevant for Disney to make a TV show is super impressive. And that tells you a lot about the lasting impact that that his life had on American culture. And I think when a lot of people think about yeah, America and the West today, even they kind of think of Davy Crockett, so to speak. I think
Yeah.
if you asked anybody um, across the world if they knew who Davy Crockett was, they might have some idea, or at least a little bit of an idea. And that's kind of amazing because he's like, I don't know if you could do that today with any of our celebrities.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like I mean, there's not too many names. There's with social media, obviously, it's a lot more, but like, there's not too many politicians out there that you could go like halfway across the world, other than maybe like our president, right? Um, or a former president that people would know across the world. But like, I bet if you weren't somewhere in France or England, you could probably say Davy Crockett, and they might have an idea, which is pretty crazy to say. You know, 200 years after somebody's lived. Um, I can't say I know anybody from France from 200 years ago, other than Napoleon. So
Yeah.
that's about it. But no, it's an amazing legacy that he's left behind in Texas history, in American culture, in everything. It's quite incredible. And he truly was the first American celebrity in that way. And yeah, I think there's a lot to be learned from Davy Crockett's life. A lot to be pulled out there. You guys have any final thoughts?
I mean, I think it really summed it up well, Aiden. I feel like David Crockett is one of those heroes from American history that really was the hero in all the ways that people remember him by. Like, there are definitely tall tales written about him, but like if you learn about the real stuff he did, it was pretty legendary.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really cool that there's such like I don't know, like a bright spot with that part of our history
Mm-hmm.
with someone like David Crockett. I think it's
Yeah,
really neat to learn about his story and just to see what he did with his life.
absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't mean to open up a can of worms towards the end, but I'm just kind of curious, like whether he actually knew or whether he fully grasped how much influence he had while he was still alive. 'Cause
Yeah, that's a
obviously he
good
was a
point.
celebrity, but
Yeah.
that was something that was on my mind. Like obviously he was still restless. He was looking for the next big thing. So I feel
I don't
like
think
I feel
part
like
of
he
me
probably didn't.
part of me thinks he didn't totally grasp the
I
impact
don't
he was having
I don't
globally.
think there was any reason to go down to Texas and risk his life fighting in the
Mhm. Yeah.
rotation there. Like if he had it made already,
Yeah.
because I know
Yeah,
I know
I
he went
know.
there out of like seeking again, he wasn't financially stable by any means.
Right.
Um,
Yeah, I don't know if he totally grasped it. I know he played into sort of his fame a little bit, but I don't think he played into it the way in all the ways he could have. I don't think he totally understood what to do with it necessarily.
which
Um,
in my opinion, that makes him all the more inspiring.
it
If he
makes
was
him all the
totally
more
oblivious to all
likable.
that.
It makes
Yeah.
him all the more likable. Yeah, yeah, because he just kind of the fame wasn't for him necessarily. Yeah, I think that that is an interesting point. That's something. It's something you wonder, huh? Yeah, I mean, it feels like just the way it ended for him that he probably didn't grasp it fully. There's just no way. I mean, like maybe I'm wrong, but it just seems like there's no way you go down to Texas to find new opportunity if you realize the amount of fame and
Yeah.
fortune that could be made off your name. Yeah, it doesn't seem like he knew what to do with it. It's almost like somebody that makes a bunch of money in like the NFL or something and then goes and spends it all somewhere. That's almost what like you have all this raw talent, but not a lot of like directive.
Exactly.
And that's kind of what it felt like a lot of times, like just like reading and learning about him. It's like he had like a lot of this like raw talent and passion, and like he was just like a go-getter, so to speak, but like didn't know how to apply it very well. And I think, yeah, that
Yeah.
it's pretty interesting.
I think being famous too meant something a little bit different back
That's
in the
true.
day.
That's true.
You could be famous, but that was before the days of direct deposit and electronic
Monetization.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nobody,
it's not directly correlated with being rich and famous.
right. Nobody was paying him, to be for the rights for Nimrod Wildfire,
Yeah, he wasn't
Yeah.
getting royalties on the
No.
cheesecake cat purchases.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in today's society, he'd do great. He could really monetize
Oh,
that.
Well, something I feel like he was really well known for is like his sense of humor.
Yeah, that's something we didn't touch on.
I wanted to share another quote with you guys because I think you'll appreciate it. So he said that Congress allows lemonade to the members and has a charge under the head of stationery. I move also that whiskey be allowed under the item of fuel. Okay, this guy tells what's going on.
Yeah, he was a smart guy.
Yeah.
He was a smart guy. Yeah. After a while, they wouldn't have been getting much done in Congress.
Yeah.
Let everybody drink. You think about how just inept they are at doing their job right now. Imagine them drunk trying to do the same job. Imagine Joe Biden actually getting up there drunk. Just imagine.
It's true. It would be.
Oh, it would be so funny.
Oh, it would be very funny.
I think they should allow it. I think they should
Yeah.
allow it once a year on August 17th on Davy Crockett's birthday. They
Yeah.
should allow everybody in the government to drink on the job in honor of him. I think that'd be good. And remember, for you, if there's any liberals out there listening that are getting upset because we're talking about an American hero and you don't like that, just remember this was the man that stood up for Native American rights. So you can shove it. This is your hero, and embrace it. And yeah, that's what I have to say. There's a lot of people that think there weren't everybody was bad back then. Everybody, treated everybody poorly, treated the Native Americans poorly. This man stood up. This man he jeopardized his political career just to stand up for what he believed in. So pretty impressive to see at that point in time when everybody was kind of the opposite. So it shows a lot of character there. But
Quite a lot. Yeah.
yeah.
Feel like we should. I don't know. I kind of want to go watch the Davy Crockett.
Yeah,
TV
we should
show
go.
again.
Maybe we should go watch that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be
It's a
good.
good idea.
Where is that?
let's actually find it before we close out so our listeners know where to find it. Actually, do you think? No, Disney Plus. They wouldn't put it there. They're too.
Yeah, I feel like that was the
Yes.
only thing Disney did that might have been okay.
Yeah, but they won't put it there. He stands up for Native American rights.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he has guns.
Yeah,
To
yeah. And he has gun. Yeah. Where
an
is it?
upstanding citizen.
He is an upstanding. Where is this? You might really have to dig in the archives, folks, for this one. There was a Davy Crockett movie, apparently, too. King of the Wild Frontier.
Was that by with Fres Parker?
No. This
That's one of the
is
2000s, right?
yeah, that's the 2000s one.
Billy Bob Thornton, I think.
Oh, that's right. That's Billy
Yeah.
Bob Thornton. Oh, I forgot
Saw
about that
a while
one.
back.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was any good or not.
I don't either. All right, folks. Well, just use the Google. You've got the Google. Go out there and Google Davy Crockett, 1954. It's a Western, okay? It was produced by ABC. It was on ABC at the time, or it was Disney, but it was on ABC at the time. It has Fess Parker in it. You'll find it. You probably have to go on YouTube somewhere or somewhere on the dark web to scrounge this up to get the full 2 seasons, but you'll find it. I wish you the best of luck in that. But guys, I
Worth the
do.
effort.
Yeah, it's worth the effort. Just go watch yourself a couple episodes and you'll be all set. Yeah, I think we can officially close this one out. I think we've done a great job. Good job, guys. I'm glad we finally did this one. It's
it was
been
a long time
it's a
coming.
long time coming.
Yeah.
It's a long time coming. But we finally made it here. But I just want to close by saying I think Davy Crockett represents something really cool in American history. He was the first in his class, so to speak, to represent what the American dream was. He represented individuals that weren't always represented at the time, and stood up for people that weren't always stood up for, whether it was the Native Americans or representing, kind of the working class man, the hardworking frontiersmen, the not so high in class, but those people who also worked hard to make their fortune in the land of opportunity, America. That was who Davy Crockett represented, and we can learn a lot from that today. We've gained a lot of our sense of nationalism from Davy Crockett and people like him. And so we owe a lot to him and the people like him in our history. So just remember that. His enduring impact on American history and folklore should ensure that his legend, the legend of Davy Crockett, should be continued to be passed down through generations. So make sure that you tell your kids to tell your kids to tell their kids to tell their kids about Davy Crockett. So that way in 500 years, we're still talking about Davy Crockett and he's still relevant. But with that being said, thanks for tuning into this week's episode of the Green Dragon podcast and our Foundations of Freedom episode. We will be releasing Foundations of Freedom episodes roughly every 2 weeks now. We're going to put a lot of effort into those episodes. We really enjoy doing those episodes with you guys. So we want to get more stories about American history, American events out there for you. And hope you guys enjoyed it. We enjoy doing these for you guys. So hope you guys enjoyed this week's show. If you did, you can drop us a like. Leave us a comment or review. Appreciate it. Like to get your feedback, what we can improve on, what you liked about the podcast, maybe what you didn't like about the podcast, so we can improve upon it. And if you liked what you heard, you can go give us a follow at the Green Dragon Pod on YouTube, Instagram, and True Social. The Green Dragon Pod on Rumble and X. X, I said it. I didn't say Twitter, folks. I said X. All right. I said it.
It updated on my phone and is now showing as X. So I will start saying X, formerly known as Twitter, if you still have the Twitter app. That just means your phone's old and you didn't do the recent iOS update. You can also listen to the show everywhere you go on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And then if you guys like good laughs and whiskey, go check out our Foolproof drinks on Instagram. We might have some Foolproof podcast episodes coming out in the future. We will see. It's kind of when we get out of hand that we end up posting those. So you just keep your eye out. We may surprise you. We may surprise you. You never know. But until next time, be safe, fight for what you believe in, and most importantly, be a good American. God bless.